Well, hello there. It is Friday night, 6:30 p.m., and it is time for the Purposeful Productivity Show. Welcome. Well, tonight wraps up checklist month, and we've been talking about checklists for the last 3 weeks. This is the fourth installment. And this one is a good wrap up from my point of view because when you work with a team, not everyone uses and needs the same set of checklists. So the idea and being able to execute on the idea of tailoring checklists for individual team members and roles within your organization is what we're going to dig into tonight, and I want you to enjoy it. Thank you. Welcome to the Purposeful Show, Purposeful Productivity Show. See, I'm excited. I'm getting confused. Glad you're in the building and want you all to get something great out of this that you can apply in your team no matter what size team you have or where your team is organized. Let me explain. Here in my business, I work with faith based organizations, faith based leaders, volunteer executives, as well as business owners to remove the friction in your productivity system. That means for you and your team. So, whether you're working with volunteers, you're working with your own associates in your own business, you're working with partners or third parties who are part of your team, extended part of your team, these information applies because they all still need a way to execute what you need them to execute to move your organization forward. So let's see who is in the building, and then we're going to jump directly into the information. I'm going to start with this one. He troublemaker is making trouble already. What is delegation? The word is foreign to me. It should not be foreign to you, and I hope tonight when we finish it will not be a foreign word for you. And we have Frank in the building. Thank you, Frank, for always being out there serving. And of course, we have none other than the emotional CEO in the building, always serving and reminding me to, yes, welcome the live tribe, whether you are here in comments in the building or you're listening because maybe you're taking care of children or maybe you're driving home or driving to another place, but you're listening. Thank you for listening and being a part of the live tribe. And for those who are not listening here, but you're a part of that magical replay crew, welcome tonight. And leave a comment in the comment section afterwards. Give me your thoughts, give me your questions. Would love to answer some questions for you. So, what we're going to do is get directly into the content. And again, I said tonight it's about how to tailor delegation checklists to team members. So let's start with this. Thank you for telling me I'm muted. I did something, I got it. I did something on my scenes and don't know why or how I muted myself, but hashtag mute nation. So I'm going to say that one more time. As a leader, you must learn the art of delegating because we don't work alone. Whether it's volunteer, business, faith, job, any organization we're a part of, including our family, we work with other people to accomplish the things that must be accomplished. And the ability and the skill And the art of delegating is something that we all must learn to do. And even if we think we're good at it, we can always improve. So there you go. And thank you for telling me I was on mute. I saw it this time. I looked over here. My monitor is way over there, so I'm looking over there. Let's get right into it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is tailoring, the power of tailoring checklists for your team. Why is it important to even want to think about tailoring your checklists? Why not just make one generic checklist or two generic checklists and they work for everyone? The answer is in the question, but let's go a little bit deeper than that. The depth of it is, first of all, it enhances your organization and efficiency. When you have things you want to accomplish, and I'm going to use your small business owner, and you want to grow your business, you want to keep your business thriving, you want to grow it, you want to serve your clients, you want to serve your team, you want your team to thrive. You will get enhanced organization and efficiency by tailoring these tech checklists where you're delegating responsibilities to members of your team. If you're a small business owner, even a solopreneur, you're going to work with someone else at some point in your business. You're not going to do everything 100% yourself. So it gives them clear task prioritization. It gives them it reduces the mental load that they have to carry. And frankly, it reduces your mental load because you just go through a checklist and that's what it involves. It also, I talked about this once before, it improves accountability. The reason I say that is there is someone who owns some area of responsibility, and it's very clear to you as the leader, and it's very clear to the person when they have ownership. It also allows you and your teammate and your colleague or your associate, I don't like the word employee, so I tend to avoid it, just saying, personal to me, but it allows you to track, you both to track your progress. Are these things that are the responsibility getting done? Are they not getting done? The third thing is it allows execution of those responsibilities to be consistent. They're not done one way this week and another way the next week. I'm going to share an example of this because I ran into this really just this last week in volunteer work that I'm doing. We have a checklist for an activity we do every week. Well, we realized in going through it this week, when we ran into some roadblocks, that we needed to take that checklist and customize it, tailor it, if you will, for a different scenario where we would need to be executing tasks. The majority of it is the same, but there's a little bit of it that's unique, and we needed to tailor it for the thing that's unique. So that is why this works. And if this gets too loud, because I'm burning up, y'all, let me know. I'm turning on a little fan right next to me. Somebody let me know. Yeah, Roy, I'll come back to that. You're distracted. Yes. The other thing that having the power of a checklist is it facilitates communication and collaboration because you're both looking at, or two different team members are looking at the same checklist and both can figure out, are we talking about the same thing with the same meaning for both of us, or are we talking about different things? So it gives us transparency in the workflow, who has ownership, what are the steps, what order of the steps. It allows the entire team to work and be transparent with each other. And quite frankly, a checklist makes it easy to delegate because you just simply take that checklist and give it to the person and say, this is the thing to do. Now I'm going to talk about later some follow-up to this, but it makes the process of delegating much easier because you're not coming off the top of your head or thinking of it at the last minute. You've pre-thought what needs to happen. It reduces stress and builds confidence. Why does it reduce stress? Because the team member is not stressed out wondering if they're following the steps that they should be following. They're not stressed out wondering are they doing the thing that they're supposed to do in their area of responsibility. You've worked together and you've defined that. And so then they have more confidence that they're executing what needs to be executed. Business, volunteer work, everything in our life is about execution. It's not about planning. It's not about ideas. It's not about thoughts. It's not about wishes. It's about actually executing. So once you want to get to this point of executing with your team, checklists are very, very critical and vital to being able to get that execution in place and start it and continuing on. It gives you agility and adaptability. Remember I said this past week I ran into something with a checklist. Well, it was easy to see when we went back through and I looked at the checklist. It was easy to see where the change needed to be, and it allowed me, oh, we got to slide in these changes over here. So I'm living this. I'm not just talking it, I'm living it. The other thing, and this is probably one of my favorite, it allows tribal knowledge to be captured on paper. Every organization, Roy, I know you can relate to this. When you're running a team, especially when it's a large team and a large organization, tribal knowledge, that's the stuff that people know about the organization and know how to do, but it's not written anywhere, oftentimes walks out the door when the person walks out the door. And you're starting over. Many people are proud of the tribal knowledge that they have in their head, and they don't want to share it with anyone. They think it's job security. No, it's hampering the organization and keeping that person from moving along and moving forward and being able to do something else, because the tribal knowledge is in their head, and if they wrote it down, the leader ensured it was written down. You have, if you will, a farm system. You can bring other team members on. You can have this person take on something at a different level that's more valuable as they get more experience, and you can keep it going. And the tribal knowledge doesn't walk out the door when the person walks out the door, for whatever reason. So those are reasons. There are others, but those are the core reasons that I would say that make having tailored custom checklist so powerful, because they are the way to reduce stress and do all of the things that I just talked about. The second thing, I'm checking my audio now because I'm paranoid, is there is an art to customizing these tailored checklists. It's not just throw them in and they will work. There is truly an art to it. And I've want to share some of my own examples, but I also want to just share with you some just points that you can follow. One is you have to understand the role specific information that's needed. That means you understand the role that the person is in and what that role needs and what that role needs to produce. What is the outcome or the value that the role, this is not the person, this is different. So many people think it's the person. It is not the person, it's the role. This function that I want done, what are the responsibilities? What are the objectives? Even what are the challenges, the potential risk? Taking those things into consideration is really important. Then it allows you to align the checklist with that role. That's number one, being very role specific in and making it. The second one is making SMART goals. We've heard this before in terms of goal, but also making SMART goals or SMART checklists. That means the information in the checklist is actionable. I'm going to start with that. It is something that someone can do, but it's also specific, it's measurable, It's achievable, meaning they can do. Often you will hear me say something is easy to do and it's easy not to do. That right there gets more of us in trouble because it is easy to do and it's easy not to do. And more often than not, well, I'll just say me. I won't put this on you. I'll say me. I'll choose not to do it. And then when something blows up, I'm kicking myself because it was easy for me to do and it was easy for me not to do. The other, we talked about that, is it's relevant. If we're giving our team, delegating work to our team, and we are not paying attention that what we're telling them to do and how we're giving it to them is relevant to their role, what are we doing? They're going to ignore it and be frustrated, and our business is going to be stuck. What we give to them has to be relevant. Working through these custom checklists will, part of that art is making sure what goes in that checklist is relevant to the role. The last one is time bound. Every organization, small business, faith-based, departments or business units in a large business, even in your home, things have a time when they need to be done. And so these checklists need to account for the time when things need to be done. I'm going to come back to that, but I want to say good evening to someone who is in the building with us because you helped me this week. So I want to make sure I say hello to one of the four horsemen, Mr. Steve Worthy from Retail Leadership with Steve Worthy. And so I'm just going to detour here for a second. If you do not catch Steve Worthy's content, you're missing it. He talks to retail leaders and he talks about retail leaders. What I will submit to you, however, is he's talking to leaders of all stripes and sizes, meaning size organizations, different types of business in industries, because the skills and the knowledge that he's sharing is applicable if you listen carefully and you're willing to apply it. So I appreciate you. I want to also come back to this comment. Other times you assign based on how it will grow the person so they are stronger next time. Ooh, that's a great point. Yes, I did that today with someone. I gave them a stretch assignment and I did it in the form of a checklist. And I told them they're going to be responsible for this area of what we're doing for a while. I'm not going to I'll decide later when I'm going to move it away from them, but I wanted to give them a stretch assignment. And so I put the checklist together and gave it to them. And then we talked through it. They made some suggestions. I'll come back to that later. And now they're off and running. Another tailoring point that was brought up, you tailor the task to the person. And, you know, based on their work ethic and personality and what their success will usually be before you assign it. Okay, I don't tend to tailor checklists based on the personality of the person. Now, I will account for, while how detailed I get, will account for the person's strengths and weaknesses and the areas of development. But I don't tend to write a checklist based on an individual person, because when that work needs to be done by someone else and it's been written for this other person, that you've got to rewrite it. So I didn't tend not to do that, but if it works for your business, great. And I'll take that feedback and I'll give it some thought and see if there are opportunities even in my world where I need to tailor based on an individual person. So thank you for your feedback for that. I talked about being flexible. So there's an art in there as well. In the art of building these custom checklists is being flexible. And maybe this is what we're talking about, Roy, with you, making a checklist based on an individual person. I just tend not to do it that way. It also allows you to engage with the team members because you got to get in and understand what their role is. And here's the key. Make sure they understand what their role is. Because if you're thinking the person's role is one thing and the person thinks that their role is something else, the most beautiful detailed checklist in the world is not going to help. So engaging with your team member to make sure there's an alignment in your understanding of what the roles are is part of the art of building an effective checklist and tailoring it for a role in your organization. Let's move on to one other thing, and I want to talk about this because it's one that I've really had to learn, even over the last, I'd say, 6 months that I've spent a whole lot of time focusing on. And that is understanding how different people consume information and being able to delegate and create checklists that include visuals, charts, images, so not solely text where necessary, video and audio as well. There are times when recently I write the checklist, but then I will record a video because there's some people who just simply won't consume the information if it's written. There are other people who won't consume the information if it's graphical. So people learn and consume and retain information in different ways. And so I've learned as I'm doing this work to make sure I'm hitting all of the ways that people consume information and can retain it. So that is a big one. And I'll tell you, I really started to pick it up when I started live streaming, because I realized there's some people who are going to watch, some people who are solely going to hear, and there are other people who need some follow-up information in writing, in written form, that will help the information I'm sharing stick with them. So these are all artful ways to start to think about tailoring your checklist. And then this next one I'm going to talk about is some specific role examples to give a little bit of context and a little bit of explanation of how these tailored checklists can be different. You may have some that you want to throw out, and I would love to hear them. And if you have a question, please go ahead and put a Q colon in front of it, because I want to answer your question. So here we go. We're going to talk about tailoring for 3 specific roles, because I think these are very common, and every business, every volunteer organization that I can imagine can relate to these particular roles. So the first one is your operations manager. Every business, every organization has someone who is responsible for the day-to-day operations. I don't care what organization it is, how big or small. It can be a small team of 3 people. Someone of those 3 people is responsible for the day-to-day operations. So what are the things that this person may be concerned with and checklists that would be applicable to them? Resource allocation and inventory management. And when I say inventory management, I'm not necessarily talking solely physical product. Although if your business or your organization is dealing with physical product, it's applicable. I do a lot of work where there are no physical products, but there are hundreds of documents. Those documents are our inventory. They are go-to-market plans, they are pitch decks, they are other types of presentations, there are lessons learned, there are project plans, there are risk management plans. It's hundreds of documents. In my faith-based organization, similarly, many documents. In other volunteer work that I'm involved in. So for you, if it's your business, if it's volunteer work, if it's your place of worship, there is some level of inventory management that somebody has to be concerned with. So that's a great one. Process optimization. This one is really on my mind because I'm working on it. In fact, getting ready to finish it out, doing some process optimization work. for an engagement and really digging in and helping someone understand how to optimize processes that they already have in place, but where are the places, the gaps where there are pain points, and we can remove those pain points. Team performance. Again, your team is going to grow, personally develop, but your operations person is checking all the time. How's the team doing? That could be a checklist, things that you want to make sure that they're covering: soft skills, hard skills, behaviors, uh, knowing where things are in the organization. Great checklist to build. So those are three things that an operations manager would be concerned with, and every organization has an operations manager. You may not call the person an operations manager, doesn't matter what you call them, but the function does exist. If you agree with me, put hashtag yes and yes in the chat. Hashtag yes and yes in the chat. The next one is an event planner. Every organization has events that they run, and you have somebody who's setting it up, planning it, making sure it executes. So there are things with, you may have venue selection checklist. What are the things that your organization require in a venue so that nothing is overlooked when you're looking for a venue? That includes virtual, because if you need certain things in place, does a webinar work better? Does a live stream work better? Does a hybrid work better? Does an interactive meeting work better? So venue selection, checklist of what you need and making sure it gets covered, great for an event planner. Uh, Vendor coordination. If you have to bring in other vendors, or your coordinator, planner need to bring in other vendor, what are the things you need to make sure are in place? Those are some ways. Day of event schedules. What are your checklists to make sure the day of goes smoothly? I learned this one from my brother when he, several years ago, when he really drilled into me my day of event down to the minute, from hours before we got to the event to after everyone else was gone and all the bills were paid. He drilled it into me. So those are ones that an event planner you can make. This one, next to your operations manager, is probably one of your most important, and that's your customer success manager. The person who's interfacing with your customers, your clients, who's answering their questions. So things like customer onboarding checklist. How do they get that? How do they deal with it? You could also give this one to your operations manager. A quarterly business review. What are the clients saying? How's it going? What's your CSAT scores? How do you track those? What do you do with it? How do you give feedback? A checklist for your customer success manager to make sure they're going through that QBR correctly and accurately. Great way to get them going. Issue resolution checklist. Where are the places that that person needs to escalate? Where are their limits of what they can decide on their own? Put it in a checklist so that they have clear direction and can execute. If you have used any of these, let me know. Put hashtag yes and yes in the chat. I would love to know what you guys are using out there. So those are some examples of types of checklists and types of roles that you can use those for as you're building. The next thing we're going to talk about is, oops, nope, not that one. Some tips for tailoring these checklists. I'm going back to that. This is the how portion. The first part was the what. This is the how. So how do you do this? Number one, involve your team. Don't just do it in blind. Involve them, talk to them. And in fact, a really good way to get an effective checklist is to have the team members prepare at least part of it, if not all of it. Because they know what they're doing. They know if they're experienced, they know how they're getting their work done. So give it to a team member and get them involved. The second one is regularly review, and I've talked about this each week, but there's no substitute for regularly reviewing and updating every checklist. You may have 50 checklists on some schedule, whether it's every 6 months, once a year, once a quarter, whatever it happens to be. Review those checklists and update them. I shared with you, and I'm going to repeat it because I think this is an easy way, easy to do, easy not to do, to get those updates in. Whenever you're reviewing how something went with a team member, take that opportunity to see if there's something in the checklist that needs to be changed. Add it, delete it, reword it, moved around. Do the update right there. Now that implies also that the checklists are someplace where they're easy to update. They're not in some document that you can't find and no one knows where they are. They're not printed and put in a 3-ring binder that no one ever picks up. They're where everyone who needs to access them can get them. All right? And I said this very early. The third leg of that is make sure they're actionable. Make sure they're specific and actionable. Not some nebulous pie, I'm going to say it, pie in the sky words that nobody can figure out what they're supposed to do. That your team member cannot figure out, what am I supposed to do here? Because this is not making sense to me. Make it very actionable, and that will be a benefit to your team member. So I'm going to come back out here because I see some comments and I want to make sure I'm getting them in because you guys are going to share some good stuff with me. And, oh, I like this one. Roy says, I use checklists for quality assurance and ensure processes are followed. Yes. Yes, in your line of work, absolutely. That is so critical because you've got some critical work that you're doing, and mistakes can cause a whole lot of problems. And you require peer sign-offs to ensure compliance. Ooh, that's a good one. Have a peer look at the checklist and sign off on it as well. That actually works as well. Okay, awesome. So we also can get into making sure, I talked about this, but in that how, making sure the checklists are set up for diverse learning styles, the way the people consume information. Because we know no two people will necessarily consume information exactly the same way. And then make sure in the how you're allowing some flexibility. Don't make it so rigid that there's no way to move. Like if they don't do something, make sure the critical things are covered, but also leave flexibility in there and allow for adaptation where it's applicable. Okay? And I'm going to repeat it because I believe in it so much. Make sure there's continuous improvement built into your process. Continuous improvement. One time I heard something that said, the higher you go, the higher you go. I will say the more you improve, the more you improve. And it's not big leaps. It's very small, almost imperceptible corrections and improvements. They're small things that by themselves may not appear to make a difference, but those small changes in these delegated, tailored checklists will make a huge difference. So the last piece is making sure your team understands the importance of using them. You know, Roy, you talked about using them for quality assurance. Making sure that your team is really on board and aligned with the reason those quality assurance checklists are being used is one very concrete example that you can follow. So there's that. And I'm going to give you a bonus, and I'm going to say that if you haven't done any of this, and you don't understand about making these checklists and tailoring them, reach out to me. I will give you as much help as I can possibly give you to make it better, make your organization work. And you can always reach me at florencedonald.live, and I will be glad. You can book 15 minutes on the calendar. Doesn't cost you anything. We can chit chat about how your checklists are going and where you need help, and then we'll figure out next steps for you. And if you have not, if you're watching and you're part of the Magical Replay crew and you have not subscribed to the channel, I would love to have you a part of the community. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Oh yeah, and hit the little bell so that you're notified when I go live, which is every Friday at 6:30 p.m. by the way. Glad to have you here with us. So I love to give you things that you can do when we finish. So the first thing I'm going to suggest is look at your organization and plan some role-specific workshops, checklist workshops. An outlet is get you and your team together and plan. Maybe you get a pizza or 2 or 3, however many, and you chill and you just go through workshop and say, what are the ones we need to create? What are the ones we need to create to start? And then go through that outline that I went over today with your team. The second thing I'm going to say is, as you implement these checklists, set up feedback loops. Make it so that the feedback happens naturally. It's not something extra, that it's a part of your regular method of operation so that you're able to improve and your team is able to improve. And the last one is implement continuous training and communication. You have new team members coming and going. You have team members coming in. You have team members taking on new roles. You're changing. Your team is changing. So all of that change requires continuous training and communication. It cannot be a one and done or set it and forget it. Delegation requires continuous, ongoing, small, easy to digest pieces of information. And then it requires the feedback so that you get better and your team gets better. So that is what I've got tonight. I'm so excited because I've worked on this one, and it's one of my favorite things to do. I find a checklist for everything. I make checklists for just about everything that I do in the work that I do. Professionally, volunteer, business, I have checklists and I work with my team on them. Like I said, this week I was working with the team and we realized together we needed to make some changes for something so that it would go smoother and it would fix some friction that we ran into. That is it for tonight. I am so happy that you all were here, and hopefully you got value. But what I'm going to say to you right now is have a great weekend. Go out and apply these lessons to the checklist for your team. Get some delegation going, tailor it, and continue to grow your organization. Have a great weekend, everybody. Good night.